Weather is about to change entirely across a large chunk of the United States, where many areas are going to deal with the potential for record-breaking high temperatures, while on the flip side of things, more severe weather will return by this weekend, which will pose a threat for more damaging winds, hail, and even a few tornadoes. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the next several days in terms of the weather, and why I think as we go later into July, the weather is actually going to become a lot quieter, but it's also about to get a whole lot warmer across the United States. So we are going to begin with what's happening across the United States right now, which honestly, there isn't much happening this morning across most of the country. We just had the remnants of Beryl go across the Northeast yesterday. This actually brought another tornado event to areas like New York, Pennsylvania, and even into New England, where we did end up having a few tornadoes in areas like Western and Central New York. The other states didn't really get anything too crazy. The remnants of Beryl, though, will continue to move to the Northeast, and it's basically just going to be moisture as it goes into areas like Greenland and as well as Nova Scotia. Now, you might remember a few days ago, I mentioned that after Hurricane Beryl, there's not any tropical systems in the forecast over the next 14 days that would be significant. Well, let's talk about this area just east of Florida. This right here actually has a low chance of developing into a tropical storm over the next 5 to 7 days. Right now, it is forecasted to track to the north and northwest towards Georgia and as well as South Carolina very slowly. Overall, it's mostly just going to be showers and thunderstorms, maybe some gusty winds. I don't expect this to become anything major. So with that said, if you see something on TikTok or Facebook saying that this is going to be a Category 8 hurricane, just know that's not even a thing. Now, back over in the Great Plains and as well as the western tier of the country, there is almost nothing happening over there right now. There is going to be a quote-unquote death ridge dominating most of the country as we go throughout the next several days. So I do think the weather pattern in those areas will be somewhat quiet for the foreseeable future. Now, a huge weather pattern change is going to be coming to the United States over the next couple of weeks, and the weather is going to be really different depending on where you are in the country. Some areas are going to be dealing with a brutal heat wave, and others will be dealing with more severe weather, sort of what we've been seeing over the last few weeks. So this is the jet stream. This gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States, and you'll notice right off the bat the winds are not very strong. The only area that we have even a jet streak right now in the United States, which a jet streak is where the maximum sustained winds are in a particular jet stream, a nice localized region, would be back over here in the Northeast, and that's what's remaining of what we had with Hurricane Beryl. Now, as we go into the weekend, you're going to notice that this area here is going to be a ridge that develops back over in the Rocky Mountains. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's not going to be any rain because this is an upper level ridge, but what this does mean is that the really warm air is going to be sitting in those areas for the foreseeable future as long as this ridge does sit over the Rocky Mountains. So areas like the Southwest, the West Coast, and even the Southern Plains can expect it to be very warm, and also in most cases it will be drier than normal. But notice this as we go into Sunday into Monday. We are going to have a low pressure system eject out of Canada, which is going to be more typical as we go later into July and August. Obviously, during the springtime, we have usually low pressure systems that go over like the Rocky Mountains, for example. That creates more mixing and bigger severe weather events. In this case, these sort of troughs usually don't bring as large of tornado threats, but these do bring prominent wind concerns and even hail threats to areas like the Midwest, Northern Plains, and even Ohio Valley. So that's what we're going to be watching out of this for as we go into Sunday, Monday, into Tuesday across parts of the Ohio Valley, Midwest, and even Northern Plains. Once we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, that trough really digs here across the Northeast, and this should allow for at least some showers and thunderstorms in like New England, for example, as we go into Tuesday. And notice this ridge, it's going to be a huge ridge across the southern tier of the country. This will keep a lot of areas at least a lot warmer, but also a little bit drier depending on where you are. And then by next weekend, overall, the weather looks extremely quiet. I'm telling you, it does not look like we're going to see anything massive as we go even into the last week of July, bearing any major changes. Now, we are going to have that occasional trough or two that come out of Canada that bring a localized wind or hail threat, maybe even a couple tornadoes to areas like the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and maybe Northeast, but it does appear, again, just extremely quiet across the United States, bearing any sort of major sort of tropical activity across the country. Now, I'm going to break this down into two different parts. We're going to first talk about the temperatures because it's going to be brutally hot hot in much of the country. And then we're going to talk about the future radar and upcoming severe weather events. Beginning with this brutal heat wave over the western tier of the country, this is the temperature anomalies, giving you an idea of where below and above average temperatures will be. And really, all the way through this weekend, we are just going to continue to battle the heat across the western tier of the country, including the Rocky Mountains and the northern plains. Once we go into early next week, things are going to start to move further to the east. So areas like the northeast, central plains, and even east coast are going to be way above average. And then colder air will usher in behind this low pressure system, but it's not going to impact many areas. The only areas that are really going to see this will be like the Midwest and maybe the central and northern plains. And that's really about it for middle of next week. Once we go into next weekend, things will start to warm right back up again. And with no current foreseeable big storms on the horizon, we are likely going to continue to see above average temperatures for the last week of July, or at least the second to last week of July. So just be ready for that. Definitely, it's going to be warm here across the country. It does not look like we have any major severe weather events, at least for now, beyond this upcoming weekend and as well as into early next week. This is what we're looking at for the temperatures as we go into Tuesday afternoon, and this gives you a good representation of that colder air that'll usher in out of Canada. So some areas will actually be in the 50s in Canada as we go into Tuesday afternoon. I wish I was there, by the way. Other areas will be dealing with 100s and even 110s perhaps back over in the central plains, and that is the effect of that ridge that will be in place. And then once we go into late Wednesday, we're going to be dealing with some much nicer weather in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, and then just brutally hot weather in areas like the Southeast. Look at this, South Carolina in the low 100s as we go into Wednesday. That is not normal for this time of the year. Here's what we're looking at for the next 6 to 10 days. The Climate Prediction Center completely agreeing with this forecast. A little bit below average, perhaps back over in Arizona and California as monsoon season ramps up, but back over in the Midwest, the same deal as well. That colder air ushering out of Canada should lead to some below average temperatures, but elsewhere, well above average for areas like Montana and also into the northern and northwestern tier, and then also back into the southeastern part of the country. It'll definitely be well above average for many areas. Now let's talk a little bit more about the severe weather potential for the next several days, and the GFS model continues to put a ton of instability back over in the northern plains and the Midwest. And what this basically means is that there's fuel for there to be severe weather. So as long as we have like an initiator, like a cold front or a dry line, we are going to end up seeing some severe storms. And I think that's a good possibility, at least for Sunday and also Monday. So those will be the 2 days to watch for as a cold frontal boundary will sweep across the Midwest and as well as the northern plains. And eventually, as we go into Tuesday, this will transition into the Ohio Valley. So something to be watching for. And then as we go into the later half of the week, we could get some isolated sporadic severe weather in the Great Plains, but it does not appear as if we're going to have anything really organized. Maybe something by maybe like the last week of July, for example. This is July 23rd. We might get another low pressure system that brings some localized severe weather to the Midwest, but again, just doesn't look like anything impressive. And this is a bit more typical for this time of the year. We usually don't see as many big severe weather events like what we would see in like May, for example. Here's what the future radar looks like for the next several days. So again, notice that tropical system will try to make landfall Friday or Saturday if it does develop into a tropical storm, which again remains a very low chance at this time. Once we go into Saturday into Sunday, we'll be watching for storms back over in the Midwest. So that is the next area to watch for. We'll probably have a live stream at least on Monday in the Midwest, as that does appear to be a bit more of an elevated risk for severe weather, hail, wind, and maybe even a few tornadoes. And then once we go into Tuesday, this moves into the Northeast. Overall, does not look very significant. And really after that, again, really just a lot of showers and storms across the East Coast and also in the Southern Plains as we go into the later half of the week. And then by next weekend, that ridge at the surface will continue to stay in place in the Midwest, which will keep those areas warmer. And then areas in the southern tier will still be warm, but there will at least be some showers to accompany that warmth. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.